The wind howled across the plains of Montana Territory, carrying with it the promise of a brutal winter ahead. Sarah Bennett stood at the edge of the dirt road, her 4 children huddled behind her tattered skirts, their hollow eyes watching the horizon with the kind of emptiness that came from hunger too long endured. 3 days. That's how long it had been since Robert died. 3 days since the fever took him, leaving her alone with Emma, barely 8 years old, little Thomas at 6, the twins Mary and Matthew just 4. 3 days since she'd buried her husband in the hard ground behind their burned-out cabin. The cabin that had taken everything when the kitchen fire spread through the dry timber like God's own judgment. She had nothing left. No food, no shelter, no kin within 500 miles. The neighbors who'd helped dig Robert's grave had offered their sympathies, but little else. They had their own families to feed, their own winters to survive. She understood. She didn't blame them. But understanding didn't fill empty bellies or keep small bodies warm when the temperature dropped below freezing at night. Sarah's legs trembled beneath her, whether from exhaustion or fear, she couldn't tell anymore. She'd been standing here for hours, waiting for someone, anyone, to pass by on this lonely road, waiting for a miracle she knew wouldn't come. Behind her, little Matthew whimpered. The boy hadn't spoken since his father died, just small sounds like a wounded animal, barely audible over the wind. Mary tried to comfort him, her thin arms wrapped around her twin, both of them shaking. "Mama," Emma whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so hungry." Sarah's heart shattered into smaller pieces, if such a thing were possible. She had no answer to give her daughter. No comfort, no hope. She closed her eyes against the tears that burned there. She'd cried herself dry the first night. Now there was nothing left but the hollow ache of failure. She'd failed her husband, failed her children, failed at everything a wife and mother should be. The sound of hoofbeats made her eyes snap open. A rider approached from the west, silhouetted against the setting sun. A large man on an even larger horse, moving with the easy confidence of someone who knew these lands well. As he drew closer, Sarah could make out more details. Broad shoulders, a worn leather duster, a hat pulled low against the sun. She stepped forward instinctively, raising one trembling hand, though she had no idea what she meant to ask of this stranger. The rider slowed as he neared, his eyes taking in the scene before him. A woman thin as a rail, her dress more patches than original fabric. 4 small children, all of them looking like they hadn't eaten in days. No wagon, no supplies, nothing but desperation hanging in the air thick enough to choke on. Jacob Thorne had seen a lot in his 42 years, but the sight before him hit him like a fist to the gut. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, pushing to get back to his ranch before the weather turned, but something in the woman's face, in those children's eyes, made him pull his horse to a complete stop. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough from disuse. He hadn't spoken to another soul in over a week. Sarah's throat worked, but no sound came out at first. Finally, she managed, "Please, sir, my children. They haven't eaten in 3 days. If you have anything to spare." She hated herself for begging, hated the weakness in her voice, but pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. Jacob swung down from his horse in one fluid motion. Up close, he was even bigger than she'd thought. 6.5 feet of solid muscle, with a face that had seen its share of hard winters and harder times. But his eyes, pale blue beneath the brim of his hat, weren't cruel, just wary. Careful, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a cloth bundle. Dried meat and biscuits, hard as rocks but edible. He held it out to her. Sarah took it with shaking hands, immediately breaking off pieces and distributing them to her children. They fell on the food like starving wolves, and she had to stop them from eating too fast. "Slow," she urged gently. "You'll make yourselves sick." Jacob watched this scene unfold, something uncomfortable twisting in his chest. He'd been alone for 5 years now. 5 years since influenza took Mary and little Daniel in the same week, leaving him rattling around in a big ranch house with nothing but ghosts and regrets for company. He should ride on, should leave these people to their fate. He had his own problems, his own demons to wrestle with. Getting involved with a desperate widow and her children was asking for complications he didn't need. But even as he thought it, he knew he couldn't. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Sarah lifted her eyes to his, and in them he saw the kind of grief that recognized its own. "Fire took our cabin 4 days ago. Fever took my husband 3 days ago. Now we have nothing. Simple, direct, no embellishment. Just the brutal truth laid bare." "You got family?" Somewhere to go? She shook her head. Robert's people disowned him when he married me. Mine are all gone. We came out here to build something new, but... Her voice broke. He swallowed hard. But it seems God had other plans. Jacob felt the weight of a decision settling onto his shoulders like a physical thing. He could give them more food, maybe a few coins, and ride on with a clean conscience. Or he could do something stupider, something that would change everything. The problem was, looking at those 4 children, all wide eyes and hollow cheeks, he knew which choice he was going to make, had known it the moment he saw them standing there like lost souls waiting for death. My ranch is about 15 miles north, he said slowly. I've got a bunkhouse that's been empty for 2 years. Roof doesn't leak. Stove works. It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry. Sarah stared at him, hardly daring to breathe. I don't understand. You and your children can stay there, through the winter at least. Give you time to figure out what comes next. I couldn't, she whispered, even as hope blazed to life in her chest like a flame in dry kindling. We couldn't impose on your charity like that. Jacob's jaw tightened. It's not charity. You'll work for your keep. Cooking, cleaning, mending. Ranch hands are all bachelors who can't cook worth a damn. You'd be doing me a favor, keeping them from burning the place down trying to make biscuits. It was a lie, and they both knew it. His hands could cook well enough, but it was a lie that let her keep her dignity. And for that, Sarah felt a gratitude so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. I'm a hard worker, she said quickly. I can cook, clean, sew, tend a garden. The children won't be trouble. Emma helps with the little ones, and Thomas is learning his letters. I promise we'll earn our keep. Something in her earnest desperation made Jacob's chest ache. When was the last time anyone had looked at him with anything other than wariness or outright fear? He was a big man, scarred and rough, with a reputation for being hard as the Montana granite. People respected him, maybe even feared him a little, but no one looked at him like he was their salvation. I'm sure you will, he said quietly. Name's Jacob Thorne. Sarah Bennett. This is Emma, Thomas, and the twins, Mary and Matthew. The children peered up at him with those huge, haunted eyes. Emma, the oldest, tried to smile despite her fear. Thomas held his little body rigid, ready to fight if needed to protect his mother. The twins just stared, Matthew still making those small, wounded sounds. Well, Mrs. Bennett, we'd better get moving before dark. It's a long walk, but my horse can carry the little ones. Walk? Sarah's voice was faint. We couldn't take your horse. Horse can carry children just fine. You and I have legs. He lifted Matthew first, settling the boy gently in the saddle, then Mary beside him. Emma, Thomas, you'll ride in front. Hold on to the saddle horn and don't let go. Within minutes, he had all 4 children secured on the big bay gelding. Then he took the reins and started walking north, leading the horse with its precious cargo. Sarah fell into step beside him, her mind reeling. This morning, she'd been ready to die, ready to watch her children slip away one by one, powerless to stop it. Now she was walking beside a stranger who'd offered them a lifeline she didn't deserve. Mr. Thorne, she said softly, why are you doing this? He didn't answer right away, just kept walking, his long strides eating up the ground. Finally, he said, had a wife once, a son. They died 5 years back. Sometimes I wonder why God saw fit to take them and leave me behind. Maybe this is why. Maybe I'm supposed to help you and your children. Or maybe I'm just a lonely fool who can't stand to see kids go hungry. He glanced at her. Does the reason matter? No, she whispered. No, it doesn't matter at all. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the wind and the soft thud of the horse's hooves on the hard-packed earth. Sarah's feet ached in her worn boots, but she didn't complain. Wouldn't complain, not when this man was saving her children's lives. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Jacob pointed ahead. There. That's home. Sarah squinted into the gathering dusk and saw lights in the distance. As they drew closer, the shapes resolved into buildings. A large ranch house, barns, corrals, and several smaller structures. It was bigger than she'd expected. Much bigger. You run this place alone? She asked. Got 4 ranch hands. Good men. They live in the main bunkhouse. He led them past the main house to a smaller building set back about 50 yards. When he opened the door and lit a lantern, Sarah gasped. It wasn't fancy, like he'd said. Just one large room with a pot-bellied stove, a table and chairs, and 4 narrow beds along one wall. But it was clean, dry, warm. To her, it looked like a palace. There's blankets in that chest, Jacob said, setting the children down carefully. I'll get a fire going and bring you some proper food. You got enough to keep them comfortable for now. Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Jacob worked quickly, building a fire in the stove with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, warmth began to fill the small space. The children gathered around it like moths to a flame, their small bodies finally beginning to thaw. "I'll be back in 20 minutes, he said, heading for the door. "Mr. Thorne?" Sarah's voice stopped him. "Thank you. I know those words aren't enough, but thank you." He looked at her for a long moment, this thin, worn woman with her haunted eyes and her fierce love for her children. "Get some rest, Mrs. Bennett. Tomorrow's a new day." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with her children in the warmth and safety she'd thought they'd never know again. She gathered them close, all 4 of them, and let the tears come at last. But these weren't tears of despair. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope, reborn from ashes. "Is he an angel, Mama?" Emma whispered. Sarah thought of the big scarred man with the careful hands and the grief in his eyes. "No, sweetheart. Just a good man, and sometimes that's even better." True to his word, Jacob returned 20 minutes later with a basket full of food. Fresh bread, butter, cold chicken, milk for the children. He set it on the table without a word. "The privy's out back," he said. "Water pumps beside it. You need anything else tonight?" "No," Sarah said softly. "This is more than enough. More than we dared hope for." He nodded once, then turned to leave again. But at the door, he paused. "Mrs. Bennett, I won't let you die here. You or those children. I give you my word on that." The door closed behind him before she could respond, leaving her standing there with her hand pressed to her mouth, overcome by emotions she had no names for. In the warmth of the bunkhouse, surrounded by her children and the smell of fresh bread, Sarah Bennett whispered a prayer of thanks to whatever force had sent Jacob Thorne riding down that lonely road at exactly the right moment. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know how she'd repay this impossible kindness. But for the first time in days, she felt something other than crushing despair. She felt hope. The first morning dawned cold and clear. Sarah woke before the children, her body still aching from days of hunger and exposure, but her mind surprisingly sharp. She had work to do, a debt to repay, even if Jacob Thorne claimed it wasn't charity. She slipped out of the warm bunkhouse into the crisp morning air, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing temperature. The ranch was already awake around her. She could hear men's voices from one of the barns, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the clang of metal on metal from what must be a forge. Jacob emerged from the main house as she approached, 2 steaming mugs in his hands. He stopped when he saw her, surprise flashing across his features. "You're up early," he said, offering her one of the mugs. "Coffee, black and strong." "I'm used to rising before dawn," she said, accepting the mug gratefully. The warmth seeped into her cold fingers. "Where would you like me to start?" He studied her for a moment, taking in the dark circles under her eyes, the way she held herself stiffly, like someone fighting through pain. "You could start by taking another day to rest. You look half dead on your feet." "I'm fine," she lied. "Please, Mr. Thorne, I need to work. I need to feel useful." Something in her voice, some desperate need for purpose, made him relent. He understood that feeling all too well. The need to work yourself into exhaustion so you didn't have time to think, to remember, to grieve. "Kitchen's in the main house," he said. "I usually make breakfast for myself and the hands around 6. If you're feeling up to it, you could take over that duty." Fair warning, they're a hungry bunch. Relief washed through Sarah. "I can do that. I'll make something hearty. There's supplies in the pantry. Help yourself to whatever you need." He led her into the main house, and Sarah had to work hard not to gape. It was beautiful, rustic but well built, with solid furniture and real glass windows. Nothing fancy, but everything spoke of quality and care. The kitchen was in the back, large and well equipped. Sarah's fingers itched to get to work. "The hands eat in the bunkhouse usually," Jacob said. "But you can ring that bell when breakfast is ready, and they'll come up to the main house. Be easier for you. I'll make enough for everyone," she promised. He nodded, then hesitated. "Your children. They can stay in your quarters, or if they're feeling up to it, there's a schoolroom upstairs. My wife used to teach Daniel his letters there. Books are still there, if Emma wants to work with the younger ones." The mention of his lost family hung in the air between them, painful and raw, even after 5 years. "That's very kind," Sarah said softly. "Emma would love that. She's been teaching Thomas herself. Jacob cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to it then." He left quickly, almost like he was running away, and Sarah understood. Some wounds never fully healed. You just learn to live with the ache. She threw herself into cooking with a vengeance, grateful for the well-stocked pantry. Bacon, eggs, biscuits from scratch, gravy, fried potatoes. She made enough to feed an army, working with the efficiency of long practice. By the time she rang the bell at 6, the kitchen smelled like heaven. 4 ranch hands filed in, looking surprised to see a woman at the stove. They were younger than Sarah expected, none over 30, all of them rough and weathered from outdoor work. "Boys, this is Mrs. Bennett," Jacob said from the doorway. "She and her children will be staying in the bunkhouse. She's going to be handling meals and such." "Ma'am," they chorused, removing their hats with varying degrees of grace. "Please sit," Sarah said, gesturing to the long table. "There's plenty." She served them quickly, making sure everyone had full plates before taking a small portion for herself. The men ate in stunned silence for a few minutes. Then the youngest one, a freckled boy who couldn't be more than 19, spoke up. "Ma'am, this is the best breakfast I've had in 3 years. Best I've ever had," another agreed. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'm glad you're enjoying it." From his seat at the head of the table, Jacob watched her move around the kitchen with quiet efficiency. She was too thin, yes, and exhaustion lined her face. But there was something else there too. A quiet competence, a gentle strength. He'd expected gratitude, maybe even civility. Instead, he got quiet dignity and honest work. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. After breakfast, the hands returned to their duties, and Jacob lingered, helping Sarah clear the table despite her protests. "Your wife's schoolroom," she said carefully as they worked. "You're sure you don't mind the children using it?" His hands stilled on the plate he was holding. Mary would have wanted it used. She loved teaching Daniel, would have loved having a classroom full of children. His voice went rough. "Better the room gets used than sitting empty collecting dust and memories." "Mr. Thorne," Sarah began, then stopped. What could she say? She knew grief, knew how it could hollow you out and leave you echoing with absence. "You lost your husband recently," he said, not looking at her. "I imagine you understand." "Yes," she whispered, "though I imagine losing a child is different. Worse, maybe. All loss is hard," he said simply. "No point in comparing suffering. Pain is pain." They finished the dishes in companionable silence, and Sarah found herself oddly comfortable in his presence. He didn't try to fill every silence with empty chatter, didn't ask invasive questions, just existed quietly beside her, solid and steady as the Montana mountains. When the kitchen was clean, he showed her the rest of the house, the sitting room with its large fireplace, the dining room with the long table that clearly hadn't been used in years, and upstairs the schoolroom. It was a lovely space, filled with light from 2 large windows. A small desk and chair sat in one corner, clearly made for a child. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with primers and readers, and even a few storybooks. "And this is wonderful," Sarah breathed. "Emma will be so happy." "There's more," Jacob said, opening another door. "Guest bedrooms. 3 of them. If you'd rather the children stayed in the house instead of the bunkhouse, they're welcome to." Sarah's throat tightened. "That's very generous, but I couldn't presume you'd be closer to the kitchen for early mornings," he interrupted. "More convenient. And the rooms are just sitting empty anyway." She looked at him carefully, trying to read the expression on his weathered face. "Mr. Thorne, why are you being so kind to us? What do you get out of this arrangement?" He met her gaze steadily. "Meals I don't have to cook. A clean house. Company, maybe, instead of rattling around in this big place alone." He paused. "And the knowledge that 4 children won't starve to death because I rode past and did nothing." It was honest, at least. "Brutally so. We'll stay in the bunkhouse," she said firmly. "It's not proper for me to stay in your house unchaperoned, even with the children here. People would talk." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "Mrs. Bennett, the nearest neighbor is 10 miles away. I don't think we need to worry about gossip." "Even so," she insisted, "I have my reputation to think of, the children's futures." He nodded slowly. "As you wish. But the schoolroom is yours to use whenever you like." They went back downstairs, and Sarah collected her children from the bunkhouse. Emma's eyes went wide when she saw the schoolroom, and even Thomas managed a small smile. "Can we really use all these books, Mama?" Emma asked, running her fingers reverently over the spines. "Mr. Thorne says yes," Sarah confirmed. "Mr. Thorne says you can read them all twice if you want," Jacob added from the doorway, startling everyone. He looked at Emma. "You like to read?" "More than anything," Emma said shyly. "Then you'll do just fine here," He turned to Sarah. "I'll be out checking the fence lines. Back by supper time." "What would you like for supper?" she asked. He paused, clearly not used to being asked such questions. "Whatever you make will be fine." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with her children in a warm, safe house full of books and possibilities. The days fell into a rhythm. Sarah rose before dawn, prepared breakfast for Jacob and his hands, then spent the day cleaning, mending, preparing meals. The work was hard but satisfying, honest. The children thrived. Emma devoured the books in the schoolroom, teaching the younger ones their letters and numbers. Thomas began to smile again, helping with small chores around the ranch. Even the twins started talking more, their hollow cheeks filling out with regular meals. Jacob remained an enigma. He was unfailingly polite but distant. He ate his meals quickly and retreated to his office or the barns. Some evenings, Sarah would see him standing at the edge of the property, staring out at the mountains, like a man waiting for something that would never come. She understood that kind of waiting, had done it herself in the weeks after Robert died. One evening, about 2 weeks after their arrival, Sarah knocked on Jacob's office door. He looked up from his ledgers, surprise crossing his face. "Mrs. Bennet, is something wrong?" "No," she said quickly. "I just wanted to show you something." She stepped aside, revealing Emma holding a carefully folded piece of paper. "Go on, sweetheart," Sarah encouraged. Emma approached Jacob's desk shyly, offering him the paper. He unfolded it to find a drawing, a ranch house, remarkably detailed for a child's work, with mountains in the background and a big bay horse in the foreground. "I drew your ranch," Emma said quietly, "to say thank you for letting us use the schoolroom." Jacob stared at the drawing for a long moment, something working in his throat. "It's beautiful," he said finally, his voice rough. "The best drawing I've ever seen." Emma beamed. "Really? Really?" He looked at Sarah. "She's very talented. She gets it from Robert's mother," Sarah said softly. "She was an artist." Jacob carefully smoothed the drawing on his desk. "Would you mind if I kept this? I could frame it, hang it in here." "I'd like that," Emma said. Then with the fearlessness of children, she asked, "Did your little boy like to draw?" The air in the room went still. Sarah's heart stopped. She'd carefully avoided any mention of Jacob's lost family, and now Emma had just charged straight into that painful territory. But Jacob didn't seem angry, just sad. "He did," he said quietly. "He was only 4 when he died, but he loved to make pictures, usually of horses. I can draw you a horse too, if you'd like," Emma offered. "For your little boy, to remember him by." Sarah saw it then. The crack in Jacob's carefully maintained armor, the way his eyes went bright with unshed tears, the tremor in his big, capable hands. "I'd like that very much," he managed. Emma nodded seriously, then left the office, her duty done. Sarah moved to follow, but Jacob's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Bennet," she turned back. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For letting your daughter remind me it's okay to remember. That remembering doesn't have to hurt quite so much." Sarah's own eyes filled with tears. "I think we all need that reminder sometimes." That night, lying in her narrow bed in the bunkhouse, Sarah thought about the big, lonely man in the big, lonely house. Thought about the way her heart had ached when she saw his carefully hidden pain. She barely knew Jacob Thorne, knew nothing about him beyond his kindness and his grief, but she found herself wanting to know more, wanting to ease the loneliness that hung around him like a shroud. It was too soon, she told herself firmly. Robert had only been dead 3 weeks. She had no business thinking about another man, especially not the man who'd saved her children's lives. But the heart, she was learning, didn't always listen to reason. Winter settled over Montana in earnest. Snow fell in thick, heavy curtains, transforming the ranch into a landscape of white and gray. The temperature dropped so low that water froze solid in the troughs overnight. Sarah had never experienced a winter this harsh. Back in Missouri, winters had been cold, but manageable. This was something else entirely. This was nature showing its teeth. Jacob made sure they had everything they needed. Extra blankets appeared in the bunkhouse, a larger supply of firewood, warmer clothes for the children, though he claimed they were just old things gathering dust in the attic. Sarah knew better, knew he was spending money they hadn't agreed on. But she also knew her children needed those warm coats and thick socks, so she swallowed her pride and accepted his generosity. The ranch hands spent more time indoors during the worst of the cold snaps, which meant more cooking, more cleaning, more work for Sarah, but she didn't mind. Work kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. It also meant more time in the main house, more time around Jacob. She began to notice small things about him. The way he always made sure the children were warm before seeing to his own comfort. How he'd slip Emma extra paper for her drawings without saying a word. The gentleness in his huge hands when he helped Thomas learn to whittle. He was good with her children, patient in a way Robert had never quite managed. It made something warm unfurl in her chest, something she tried very hard to ignore. One particularly brutal evening, when the wind howled like a living thing and the temperature plummeted below zero, Jacob appeared at the bunkhouse door. "Storm's getting worse," he said without preamble. "You and the children should come to the main house tonight. This building's good, but the main house is better insulated." Sarah wanted to argue, to maintain her carefully constructed boundaries, but one look at her children's pinched faces made the decision for her. "Thank you," she said simply. "We'll gather our things." They made the short trip through the howling wind, Jacob carrying both twins while Sarah and Emma shepherded Thomas between them. Inside the main house, the warmth was almost overwhelming. "Guest rooms are made up," Jacob said, setting the twins down carefully. "Help yourselves to whatever you need." The children were settled quickly, all four of them in one large bedroom, because the twins refused to be separated from their older siblings. Sarah tucked them in with extra blankets and kissed each forehead tenderly. When she came back downstairs, she found Jacob stoking the fire in the sitting room. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Again. He straightened, his large frame backlit by the firelight. "You don't need to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do. You saved our lives. You continue to save our lives every day. That deserves more gratitude than I could possibly express." He looked uncomfortable with her praise. "I'm just doing what any decent person would do." "That's not true, and you know it. Plenty of people passed us on that road. Only you stopped." Jacob turned back to the fire, his shoulders tense. "Maybe I stopped because I was tired of being alone. Maybe I'm the selfish one here." Sarah moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "You're not selfish. You're one of the kindest men I've ever met." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't know me, Mrs. Bennet. Don't know what I've done, the things I've seen and caused." "Then tell me," she said softly. "Tell me who Jacob Thorne really is." He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, still facing the fire, he began to speak. "I came west 20 years ago. Young, stupid, full of myself. Worked as a hired gun for a while. Did things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who probably didn't deserve it." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Then I met Mary. She was a school teacher in a little town in Wyoming. Prettiest thing I'd ever seen, with a smile that could light up a room." He paused, lost in memory. "She saw something in me I didn't see in myself. Made me want to be better. We got married, moved here, started this ranch. Had Daniel 3 years later. For 5 years I had everything I ever wanted." His hands clenched into fists. "Then the influenza came through. Took half the town, including my wife and son." Sarah's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry. I was gone when it happened, 50 miles away, buying cattle. By the time I got back, they were already buried." His voice broke. "I never got to say goodbye. Never got to tell them I loved them one last time." "They knew," Sarah said with certainty. "Love like that doesn't need words." He finally turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw the same desolation she'd felt standing on that empty road with her dying children. "I don't deserve to be happy again," he said quietly. "Don't deserve another chance when they didn't get one." Sarah crossed the distance between them without thinking, driven by an instinct older than thought. She took his big scarred hands in her smaller ones. "That's grief talking," she said firmly. "That's the voice that tells us we should have died too. But Jacob, that's not what they would have wanted. Your Mary wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because Robert wouldn't want me to give up either. He'd want me to live, to find joy again, even through the grief." She squeezed his hands. "We honor them by surviving, by choosing to keep going even when it hurts." Jacob looked down at their joined hands, something vulnerable and raw in his expression. "You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's the hardest thing in the world, but it's necessary." They stood there in the firelight, connected by shared loss and tentative hope, until Sarah realized what she was doing. She was holding hands with Jacob Thorne, standing close enough to feel the heat radiating from his large body, looking at him not with gratitude but with something warmer, something that had no place in her heart so soon after losing Robert. She stepped back quickly, releasing his hands. "I should check on the children. Mrs. Bennet, good night, Mr. Thorne." She fled up the stairs, her heart pounding. What was she thinking? Robert had been dead less than a month. She had no business feeling anything for another man, especially not the man who'd taken them in out of charity. But as she lay awake in the guest room, listening to her children's peaceful breathing, she couldn't stop thinking about the look in Jacob's eyes, the warmth of his hands, the way her heart had stuttered when he'd looked at her. In the sitting room below, Jacob stood staring into the fire, his hands still tingling from her touch. He'd been alone for 5 years. 5 years of carefully constructed isolation, of keeping everyone at arm's length. Sarah Bennett had blown through those defenses like they were made of paper. He was in trouble, deep trouble, because somewhere between finding her on that desolate road and standing here in his sitting room, he'd started caring, started wanting things he had no right to want, started falling for a woman who was still grieving her husband, a woman with 4 children who needed stability, not a broken-down cowboy with more demons than good sense. He needed to be careful, needed to maintain distance, for her sake as much as his own. But the thought of going back to being alone, now that he'd tasted what it felt like to have life in this house again, made something in his chest ache worse than any physical wound. The storm raged for 3 days. 3 days of being snowed in, of Sarah and the children living in the main house. 3 days of carefully maintained distance that felt more fragile with each passing hour. Sarah threw herself into cooking and cleaning with almost desperate energy. She reorganized the entire kitchen, mended every piece of clothing she could find, scrubbed floors that were already clean. Anything to avoid the growing awareness between her and Jacob. But avoidance only worked for so long. On the 3rd evening, after the children were asleep and the ranch hands had retreated to their bunkhouse, Sarah found herself alone in the kitchen with Jacob. He was reading through some papers at the table while she finished cleaning up from supper. The silence between them had weight, texture. It pressed against her skin like a physical thing. "Mrs. Bennett," Jacob said finally, not looking up from his papers. "May I ask you something personal?" Sarah's hands stilled in the washwater. "Of course." "Did you love your husband?" The question caught her off guard. She dried her hands slowly, buying time to formulate an answer. "That's a complicated question. Most important questions are." She sat down across from him, folding her hands on the worn wooden table. "I respected Robert, was grateful to him for marrying me when no one else would. He was a good man, a decent provider when times were good." "But did you love him?" Jacob pressed. Sarah met his eyes. "I cared for him, tried to be a good wife. But love..." She shook her head slowly. "I'm not sure I know what that word means. My parents arranged our marriage. I was 17, he was 35. We barely knew each other. Love was never part of the bargain." Something flickered in Jacob's expression. "That's a lonely way to live. I had the children. They were enough." She paused. "What about you? You loved your Mary." "More than life itself," he said simply. "From the first moment I saw her, she was everything good in the world, and somehow she chose me. You make yourself sound like you were unworthy of her. I was. I told you what I did before I met her. The things I'm not proud of." Sarah leaned forward. "Jacob, we're all more than our worst moments. You chose to be better. That's what matters." The use of his first name hung in the air between them. She'd never called him Jacob before, always Mr. Thorne, maintaining that formal distance. "Sarah," he said softly, and her name on his lips sent warmth flooding through her. "I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "All right. I'm glad I found you on that road, gladder than I have any right to be." He reached across the table, his large hand stopping just short of hers. "You and your children, you've brought life back to this house. Made me remember what it's like to feel something other than grief." Sarah's breath caught. "Jacob, I know it's too soon," he continued. "No, you're still grieving. No, I have no right to feel anything beyond simple kindness. But I'm tired of lying to myself. Tired of pretending I don't care." She should pull away. Should remind him of propriety and appropriate mourning periods and all the rules that govern such things. Instead, she closed the distance, covering his hand with hers. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Scared of what I'm feeling. It's too fast, too soon. Robert's barely cold in the ground, and here I am. Here you are surviving," Jacob said firmly. "Here you are being human. There's no shame in that. People would judge. People 10 miles away who don't know our circumstances and don't matter." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just needed you to know, needed you to understand why I can't seem to stay away from you." Sarah's eyes burned with tears. When was the last time someone had looked at her like this? Like she mattered? Like she was more than just a burden or an obligation? Never. Not even Robert on their wedding day. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Don't know how to feel these things without guilt. Then we'll figure it out together. Slowly, carefully." He squeezed her hand gently. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people trying to find their way out of grief. It was that simple statement, that lack of demands, that undid her. She'd spent her whole life meeting other people's expectations, being the dutiful daughter, the compliant wife, the perfect mother. No one had ever asked what she wanted, what she needed. "I'd like that," she said softly. They sat there in the lamplight, hands joined across the table, speaking in soft voices about everything and nothing, about their childhoods and their fears, about dreams they'd given up on and hopes they were afraid to voice. It was the most honest conversation Sarah had ever had with anyone. When they finally parted for the night, Jacob lifted her hand to his lips in a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Jacob." She floated up the stairs, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months, maybe years. Behind her, Jacob stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching her go, a small smile playing at his lips. Maybe, just maybe, they both deserved a second chance at happiness. The storm broke the next morning, revealing a world transformed by snow. Everything was white and pristine, beautiful in its deadly cold. The children were ecstatic, begging to play in the snow. Sarah bundled them up carefully and watched from the window as Jacob taught them to build a snowman. His large hands were gentle as he helped Mary pack the snow, patient as he showed Thomas how to make snowballs. He would have been a wonderful father, she thought. Still could be, if he'd let himself. That afternoon, while the children napped and Jacob was out checking on the livestock, Sarah made a decision. She went to the small mirror in the guest room and really looked at herself for the first time in weeks. She was too thin, her face gaunt with recent privations. Her hair needed cutting, her dress was worn and patched. She looked like what she was, a widow struggling to survive. But in her eyes she saw something new, a spark of life she'd thought extinguished. Hope, fragile but growing stronger. She wasn't ready for anything serious, wasn't ready to make promises or plans, but she was ready to stop feeling guilty for being alive, ready to explore whatever this thing was between her and Jacob without letting fear hold her back. That evening, she asked Emma to watch the younger children for a bit. Then she sought out Jacob in the barn, where he was tending to the horses. "Jacob," she called softly. He turned, surprise crossing his features. "Sarah, is everything all right?" "Yes, I just wanted to talk to you. Alone." He set down the brush he'd been using and gave her his full attention. "I'm listening." Sarah took a deep breath. "Last night you said we'd figure this out together, slowly and carefully." "Yes, I want that too. Want to see where this leads." She moved closer, her heart pounding. "But I need you to understand something. I've never been courted, never had anyone try to win my heart. Robert just showed up at my father's house with a preacher, and that was that." Jacob's expression softened. "Then I'll have to make up for lost time. I don't need grand gestures or fancy words. I just need honesty, patience, and time. You have all of that," he promised. "And more if you want it." She smiled, tentative but real. "What would courting even look like under our circumstances?" "Well," Jacob said thoughtfully, "I suppose it would look like what we've already been doing. Talking, getting to know each other, spending time together." He paused, though maybe with more intention, more openness about what we're feeling. "I can do that," Sarah said. He reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "You're beautiful, you know that." She laughed, the sound bitter. "I'm skin and bones. My dress is more patches than original fabric. I look about 100 years old." "You look like a woman who's survived things that would break most people," he corrected. "You look like strength and grace and stubborn determination. And to me, that's the most beautiful thing in the world." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. "You shouldn't say such things." "Why not if they're true?" "Because you make me want things I've never let myself want before. Make me hope for things I thought were impossible." "What kind of things?" he asked softly. She looked up at him, at this big, gentle man who'd saved her life and stolen her heart without even trying. "A real partnership. Someone who sees me as more than just a duty or a burden. Love maybe, if I'm brave enough to reach for it." Jacob's eyes blazed with an intensity that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel safe, protected, cherished. "Sarah Bennett," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you could never be a burden to me." And I intend to spend however long it takes proving that to you. He leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. But she didn't. She met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss so soft and sweet it made her soul ache. It was nothing like the perfunctory kisses Robert had given her. This was reverent, tender, full of promise and possibility. When they parted, both were breathing hard. Too soon? Jacob asked, concern flickering across his face. No, Sarah whispered. Exactly right. They stood there in the barn, wrapped in each other's arms, the future suddenly looking brighter than either had dared imagine. Winter deepened, but inside the ranch house warmth bloomed. Jacob courted Sarah with quiet gestures. Fresh flowers on the breakfast table, picked from the carefully tended hothouse behind the barn. Small gifts for the children that he'd claim were just things taking up space. Time spent teaching her to read the ledgers so she could help with the ranch bookkeeping. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. Just made it clear through 1,000 small kindnesses that she was valued, wanted, cherished. Sarah bloomed under his attention like a flower starved for sunlight. She laughed more, smiled more, began to see herself the way Jacob saw her, as someone worthy of love. The children adored him. Emma followed him around like a devoted puppy, sketching everything he did. Thomas wanted to learn to ride and rope and do all the things cowboys did. Even the twins, usually shy, would climb into his lap in the evenings and demand stories. He was patient with all of them, answering endless questions and teaching them with genuine joy. One snowy afternoon in late January, Jacob found Sarah in the kitchen, staring out the window with tears streaming down her face. The children were upstairs in the schoolroom, their laughter drifting down through the ceiling. "Sarah," he said softly, concern flooding his chest. "What's wrong?" She turned to him, and the smile that broke through her tears was radiant. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. For the first time in my life, and I don't know how to hold all this happiness inside." Jacob crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. "Then don't hold it in. Let it out. Laugh, cry, whatever you need." She buried her face against his chest, her body shaking with sobs that were equal parts joy and relief. All the fear, all the grief, all the desperate hope of the past months came pouring out. Jacob held her through it all, one large hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft words of comfort and love. "I was so scared," she whispered when she could speak again. "So scared that this was all a dream, that I'd wake up and be back on that road with my children dying in my arms. This is real," Jacob promised. "I'm real. We're real. And I'm not going anywhere." "I don't deserve this," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't deserve you or this house or any of it." "Sarah Bennett," Jacob said firmly, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "You deserve every good thing in this world. You're the strongest, bravest woman I've ever known. You kept yourself and 4 children alive through circumstances that would have broken most people. You deserve to be happy, to be loved, to have a home and a future. You really believe that?" "With every fiber of my being." She kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and love and desperate hope into that kiss. Jacob responded in kind, his arms tightening around her, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard, their faces flushed. "I want to marry you," Sarah said suddenly. "Not in 6 months or a year. Soon. As soon as we can arrange it." Jacob's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "People will talk. Let them talk," she said fiercely. "I don't care about propriety or mourning periods or what strangers think. I care about building a life with you. I care about my children having a father who loves them. I care about being your wife in truth, not just in my heart." "The children," Jacob said carefully. "How do they feel about this?" "About me," Sarah laughed. "They love you. Emma draws pictures of you constantly. Thomas told me last week that you're the best father in the whole territory. The twins ask for you every night at bedtime. They've already claimed you as theirs." Relief and joy washed over Jacob's face. "Then yes, let's get married. Tomorrow, if we can find a preacher willing to come out in this weather." "Tomorrow might be pushing it," Sarah said, laughing. "But soon, very soon." They sealed the promise with another kiss, this one full of passion and promise and the bone-deep certainty that they were meant for this, meant for each other. That evening, Jacob called the children down from the schoolroom. Sarah stood beside him, her hand in his, as he addressed her 4 precious ones. "Children," he began, his voice gentle but serious. "I want to ask you something important." 4 pairs of eyes looked up at him with trust and affection. "Your mama and I have been talking, and we'd like to get married. But only if you're all right with it. Only if you're comfortable with me becoming your father." Emma spoke first, her voice clear and certain. "We'd like that very much, Mr. Thorne. You're already like a father to us." "You teach me things," Thomas added shyly. "And you're patient when I don't understand right away." Mary and Matthew just nodded solemnly. Then Mary said in her small voice, "Will you read us stories every night, even after you marry Mama?" Jacob's throat tightened. "Every single night, I promise." "Then we want you to be our papa," Mary declared, and Matthew nodded his agreement. Jacob looked at Sarah, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Looks like we have their blessing." "Looks like we do," Sarah agreed, her own voice thick with emotion. Emma stepped forward and hugged Jacob around the waist. "Thank you for saving us, Papa." The word Papa hit Jacob like a fist to the chest. He dropped to one knee so he was at Emma's level, and pulled all 4 children into his arms. "Thank you for letting me love you," he said roughly. "Thank you for giving me a reason to be happy again." Sarah watched her family, her new, beautiful, impossible family, and knew that she'd never been more blessed in her entire life. The wedding was planned for late February, giving them time to prepare, but not waiting for the full year of mourning that convention demanded. The ranch hands were enlisted to help, and even the neighboring ranchers pitched in, bringing supplies and food for the small celebration. The night before the wedding, Sarah lay in her bed in the bunkhouse, unable to sleep. Tomorrow she would become Jacob's wife. Tomorrow her children would officially have a father again. Tomorrow everything would change. A soft knock on the door made her sit up. "Come in." Jacob entered, looking sheepish. "I know it's not proper for me to be here, but I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about tomorrow." "Me too," Sarah admitted, patting the bed beside her. "Sit with me for a bit." He settled onto the edge of the bed, careful to maintain some distance. "Having second thoughts." "Not even close," she said firmly. "Just overwhelmed by how much my life has changed. 2 months ago, I was ready to die. Now I'm about to marry the best man I've ever known." "I'm not that good," Jacob protested. "Yes, you are," Sarah insisted. "You're kind and patient and generous. You've given me and my children everything we could possibly need and asked for nothing in return." "I'm getting plenty in return," Jacob said softly. "I'm getting a wife I love, 4 beautiful children, a house full of laughter again, a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just going through the motions." Sarah reached out and took his hand. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me that if I ever take you for granted, if I ever forget how lucky I am, you'll remind me." "You could never take me for granted," Jacob said. "But I promise anyway." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands joined, hearts aligned. Outside the wind howled and the snow fell, but inside the bunkhouse all was warm and safe and full of promise. "I should go," Jacob said reluctantly. "Let you get some sleep before tomorrow." "Jacob?" Sarah's voice stopped him at the door. "I love you. I know I've said it before, but I want you to hear it again. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone." His smile could have lit up the darkest night. "I love you too, Sarah. Tomorrow can't come soon enough." After he left, Sarah lay back down, but sleep still eluded her. Her mind was too full of thoughts and feelings and plans for the future. She thought about Robert, buried in the cold ground, back in the burned-out ruins of their old homestead. She'd cared for him, mourned him, but she'd never loved him the way she loved Jacob. That realization should have brought guilt, but instead it brought peace. Robert would have wanted her to survive, to find happiness, to give their children a good life. He might not have been demonstrative with his affections, but he'd never been cruel. He would have approved of Jacob, she thought, would have been grateful that his family was safe and provided for. "I hope you're at peace, Robert," she whispered into the darkness. "And I hope you understand. I'm going to be happy now. I'm going to live, not just survive. And I'm going to love with my whole heart, the way I never got to love you." As if in answer, a gust of wind rattled the windows, then settled into stillness. Sarah chose to take it as a blessing. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with sunlight sparkling off the snow like diamonds. Sarah dressed with Emma's help, her fingers trembling as she buttoned the new dress Jacob had given her. It was beautiful, simple but elegant, in a deep blue that brought out her eyes. The seamstress in town had outdone herself, creating something that made Sarah feel like a princess instead of a worn-out widow. "You look beautiful, Mama," Emma breathed. "You think Papa will like it?" Sarah asked, using the name for Jacob that the children had adopted. He's going to love it, Emma assured her. He loves you. At precisely 11 o'clock, Sarah walked from the bunkhouse to the main house where the ceremony would take place. The ranch hands lined the path, their hats off in respect. Thomas walked beside her, proud to be giving his mother away. Inside the sitting room, Jacob waited. He dressed in his best suit, his hair freshly cut, his beard neatly trimmed. But it was the look on his face when he saw her that took Sarah's breath away. Pure, unadulterated love, wonder, joy, like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. The preacher spoke about second chances and the healing power of love, about how God sometimes brought people together in unexpected ways for his own purposes. When it came time for the vows, Jacob's voice was steady and sure. I, Jacob Thorne, take you, Sarah Bennett, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, cherish you, protect you and your children for as long as I draw breath. I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father your children need. This I swear before God and these witnesses. Sarah's voice shook with emotion as she made her own vows. I, Sarah Bennett, take you, Jacob Thorne, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with my whole heart, to stand beside you in joy and sorrow, to build a life and a family with you. You saved us when we had nothing left. Now I give you everything I have to give, my love, my trust, my future. This I swear before God and these witnesses. As Jacob slid the ring onto her finger, Sarah looked into his eyes and saw their future stretching out before them. Not perfect, life never was, but full of love and laughter and the kind of partnership she'd never dared dream of. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the preacher intoned. You may kiss your bride. Jacob did thoroughly, to the delight of the children and the amusement of the guests. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. There was food and music and dancing. The children ran wild with excitement. The ranch hands teased Jacob good-naturedly about finally finding someone who could tame him. But through it all, Jacob's eyes never left Sarah. His hand found hers at every opportunity. His smile was constant and genuine. And Sarah, who'd spent so much of her life feeling invisible and unimportant, basked in the warmth of being truly seen and cherished. As the sun set and the guests departed, the children were tucked into bed by the ranch hands, giving the newlyweds their privacy. Sarah and Jacob stood together in the bedroom that was now theirs, the weight of anticipation hanging between them. Are you nervous? Jacob asked softly. A little, Sarah admitted, but more excited than nervous. I want to make this special for you, Jacob said, moving closer. Want to show you how much I love you, how much you mean to me. Then show me, Sarah whispered, reaching for him. You're wonderful with them, Sarah said one evening, watching him show Thomas how to carve a wooden horse. They're good kids, Jacob replied. You've raised them well. They didn't have much of Robert in their upbringing. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't particularly interested in children. Saw them as farmhands in training, nothing more. Jacob frowned. That's a shame. Kids deserve better than that. They have better now, Sarah said softly. They have you. He looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, all right? If I were to ask you to marry me, eventually, when enough time has passed that it's proper, what would you say? Sarah's heart stuttered. They'd been circling around this question for weeks now, but having it laid out so plainly still stole her breath. I would say yes, she answered simply, if you truly wanted me and the children. All of us as a family. Relief washed over Jacob's face. I want that more than I've wanted anything in 5 years. Want to wake up next to you every morning. Want to watch your children grow into the fine adults I know they'll be. Want to maybe, if God's willing, give them some brothers and sisters. Sarah blushed at the implication, but didn't look away. I'd like that too. All of it. But it's too soon, Jacob acknowledged. People would talk, say we were disrespectful to Robert's memory. Let them talk, Sarah said with surprising fierceness. I lived my whole life doing what other people thought was proper. Marrying a man I didn't love because it was expected. Staying silent when I had opinions. Making myself smaller to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. She took his hand. I'm done with that. If you want to marry me in 6 months instead of waiting a year, then we'll do it. And anyone who has a problem with it can keep their opinions to themselves. Jacob laughed, the sound full of joy and surprise. Mrs. Bennett, you continue to amaze me. Good, she said pertly. A wife should keep her husband on his toes. Is that what you are? My wife, Not yet, she said, her eyes twinkling. But someday soon, if you play your cards right. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest. His heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear, solid and real and alive. I love you, he said quietly. No, it's fast. No, it's probably foolish. But I love you, Sarah Bennett. Love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you've refused to let life break you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. I love you too. Didn't think I'd ever say those words and mean them, but I do. I love you, Jacob Thorne. They sealed the promise with a kiss, deeper this time, full of passion barely restrained. When they finally parted, both were flushed and breathing hard. We should probably stop, Jacob said reluctantly, before I forget myself. Probably, Sarah agreed, though she made no move to step away. Though it would be easier if you weren't so. She waved a hand at him, taking in his large frame and handsome face. He grinned. So what? So everything, she muttered, making him laugh. Come on, he said, taking her hand. Let's go check on the children before I do something we'd both regret. As spring approached, bringing with it the first hints of warmth and the promise of new life, Jacob made his proposal official. He went down on one knee in the sitting room, with all 4 children watching, and presented Sarah with a simple gold band. Sarah Bennett, he said formally, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of letting me be a father to your children, of building a life with me here on this ranch? Yes, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The children erupted into cheers, and Jacob swept Sarah into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. They were married on a bright May morning, with wildflowers blooming across the meadows and the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. The preacher from town came out, along with a few neighboring ranchers who'd heard the news. Sarah wore a new dress, simple but beautiful, that Jacob had commissioned from a seamstress in town. Emma and Mary were her attendants, wearing matching ribbons in their hair. As Jacob slid the ring onto her finger, Sarah looked into his eyes and saw their future stretching out before them. Not perfect, life never was, but full of love and laughter and the kind of partnership she'd never dared dream of. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the preacher intoned. You may kiss your bride. Jacob did thoroughly, to the delight of the children and the amusement of the guests. That evening, after the small celebration was over and the children were settled in their rooms, Sarah stood in the bedroom she would now share with Jacob, suddenly nervous. She'd been married before, yes, had borne 4 children. But that had been duty, not desire. This was different. This mattered. Jacob entered quietly, closing the door behind him. He'd removed his jacket and loosened his collar, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. You're nervous, he observed. A little, she admitted. Is that foolish? Not at all. He crossed to her, taking her hands gently. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I can wait. I don't want to wait, Sarah said quickly. With Robert, it was never... I never really understood what all the fuss was about. Understanding dawned in Jacob's eyes. He wasn't gentle with you. He wasn't cruel exactly, just efficient, like another chore to be completed. Jacob's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice soft. Sarah, I promise you, what we have together will be nothing like that. I'll be gentle, patient, and if you want me to stop at any point, you just say so. She believed him, trusted him in a way she'd never trusted anyone. Make love to me, Jacob, she whispered. Your wife wants you. He kissed her then, deep and slow, taking his time. His hands were gentle as they unlaced her dress, reverent as they explored her skin. He worshipped her with touches and whispers, showing her what it meant to be truly cherished. And Sarah, who'd never known passion, who'd thought herself incapable of such feelings, discovered that love could set you on fire in the most wonderful way. Later, wrapped in her husband's strong arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, Sarah felt a peace she'd never known. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Jacob murmured sleepily. For stopping on that road. For not letting us die out there. For showing me what love really means. He tightened his arms around her. Thank you for letting me love you. For bringing life back into this house. Into my heart. They fell asleep like that, 2 broken people made whole by finding each other. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Sarah proved to have a head for numbers and business that complemented Jacob's practical ranching skills perfectly. The children grew strong and happy. Emma became a teacher herself, eventually taking over the small school in town. Thomas followed in Jacob's footsteps, becoming a rancher of note in his own right. The twins, inseparable as always, opened a general store together. And Sarah and Jacob, they added 3 more children to their family, 2 boys and a girl. All of them loved fiercely by their parents and older siblings alike. Jacob never forgot his first family. Their pictures still hung in the sitting room, and he told his younger children stories about the brother and mother they'd never known. But the grief that had once consumed him transformed into something softer, bittersweet memory rather than sharp-edged agony. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jacob took Sarah up to the highest point on the ranch, where you could see for miles in every direction. "You know," he said, pulling her close, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd ridden past that day. If I'd just kept going, we would have died," Sarah said simply. "Me and the children, we wouldn't have lasted another day. I would have spent the rest of my life alone," Jacob added, "bitter and broken, with nothing but ghosts for company." "Then I guess we saved each other," Sarah said, smiling up at him. "I guess we did." He kissed her forehead tenderly. "Best decision I ever made, stopping on that road." "Best day of my life," Sarah agreed. "The day a cowboy said he wouldn't let us die there." They stood together in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the life they'd built from nothing but desperation and hope. 2 lost souls who'd found each other in the wilderness and created something beautiful from their shared grief. Behind them, their children's laughter echoed across the meadow. Ahead of them stretched more years of love and partnership, and the quiet joy of a life well lived. And in that moment, standing in her husband's arms, with the Montana sky stretching endlessly above them, Sarah Bennett Thorne knew what it meant to be truly, deeply, perfectly happy.